emissions. So, why urban futures? First word to summarize that: scale. The world has become urban at an unprecedented scale during the last 5 decades, with a 5-fold increase in urban populations. The rate at which we are becoming urban is also unprecedented. In 1950, we had 75 cities of more than 1 million. In 2011, we have 447. Location. Currently, most urbanization is taking place in Asia and in Africa, and in smaller and medium cities. This offers challenges, but also opportunities I cannot talk about now. Urban areas are carbon hotspots, accounting for about 70% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. But we don't know a lot about that, and that's something NCAR can address. This plot shows 71 countries and how urbanization, which is the horizontal line, relates to carbon emissions, which is the vertical line. We also prove and show that a selected group of wealthy and more urbanized nations contributes most to global carbon emissions. US is part of that group. For sure, many African countries are not part of that group. Multiple factors determine urban carbon emissions once we move to the city level. One is the economic base of a city, and the other is the energy efficiency of many of its activities. We focus a lot on those issues, but we have found that spatial structure and urban form, meaning density, are more important factors we need to address together with the transportation layout of a city. Public transportation relates with less emissions. Urban areas are also climate vulnerability hotspots. And we show that in this map that has received a lot of attention internationally. The map shows many of the more than 1 million cities, but it also shows the cumulative score of risk of exposure to cyclones, flooding, landslides, and droughts. It also shows that mostly cities from the south are more vulnerable to these hazards. We have found that not only the levels, but also the rates of urbanization influence the vulnerability of urban populations to droughts, floods, landslides, and hurricanes. Countries with rapid urbanization and economic transformation, mostly in Africa and in Asia, face significant challenges to adapt to droughts, floods, landslides, and hurricanes. I can tell you why if you ask me later on. Although these cities are more vulnerable and these countries are more vulnerable, you can see here in a meta-analysis we did of urban populations vulnerability that it is mostly North America and Europe that have been studied. So NCAR has a big challenge there. Across cities, and then let me move down to the downscale here, 4 sets of factors determine urban populations' vulnerability to heat waves, droughts, flooding, and other hazards. The first is the geographic location, which determines the exposure of populations to flooding, wildfires, storm surges. We could see that from our flooding last year in September. Another key set of factors is related to such socio-demographic characteristics of individuals as age, gender, minority status, and access to air conditioning and swimming pools. Third, and equally important, is how appropriate it is climate-proof infrastructures, urban infrastructures, and housing and the built environment are to face these hazards. Equally important is the quality of public policies and actions. For instance, not only disaster response, but also actions to allow people to recover and bounce forward. Last but not least, urban areas are crucibles of climate innovations and policy initiatives we studied across the globe, particularly across the Americas and in Asia. And we have found that there are 2 challenges. One is there are two opportunities. One is leadership and political ambition of majors, and the presence of scientific groups. We play a role there. And challenges. Many of the climate actions are mostly incremental, business as usual, and we need to move to transformative actions. Thank you very much.
Check.